What's up? Welcome back. Uh, keep going today on the no code list, Built in Builder. Last Monday, 2 days ago, I was able to do a couple things I wasn't able to do earlier, some snags I ran into. So we fixed the fonts. We set up a bunch of the main kind of base level primary classes because of that, based on that. And then I fixed the categories. They're popping in now. And then we fixed a little bug and started some responsive on, not even a bug, but started some responsive for the cards themselves. So here's where we're at. And I haven't touched this since the last build. But that's the current builder version. And then here's the live version. So you can see they're pretty close. They're not totally exact. And there's a few details to fix, but one of the big things, the reasons they're not, is the cards here. So that's what I'm going to start with today. I'm going to have them by the end of today. I'm going to have the cards looking like this. Depending on how I feel and how long it takes, I'll do some of these hovers and styles in here next. But I have a feeling that it might take most of the day or enough of the day today that I'll end up just doing this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to style it, but I'm also going to do some conditional logic for if there's an endorsement, it shows one message. If there's not, it shows another. And then there's a couple things like if it has an affiliate link, I put the affiliate link in there. So that one will be pretty easy to set up. If there's projects that use this in their stack, I'm going to try to set that up now, but I'm not 100% sure. I might need to... Actually, yeah, no, I can set that up. That's pulling straight into the Airtable. So in that, the way that works, this is the no code list in Airtable. And this is the stacks list. Separate table. But because the stacks, you choose your software, which I believe is right here. That gets automatically linked in Airtable. So at the end of this table, there's a lot of columns here for different things. And one of them would be the stacks that are used. So I can find out if it's in any stacks, count them and display that. Another would be like agencies that specialize in them, stuff like that I can do, but I don't think that's actually in the no code list. But yeah, so I think I'll be able to do that too. So I should be able to get this whole card done. The showcase link, if it has an examples link, and the categories too. So let's just get started. And on Monday, I did the headings and paragraph styles like at a base level. So what I'm going to start with today is if they need any overwrites, which I'm not sure. They might not even. If they do, we'll add a class like, instead of just header, it'll be card header because these are cards. And so that's a CSS thing. You can keep your classes and your CSS organized by having an outer class of card. Then if you want to modify the heading only when it's in cards, you can call it card header. Or in real CSS where you can't use spaces in the style names or the class names, people do all kinds of, there's a few different popular frameworks for setting this up where you might write card -- header or stuff like that. But in Builder's case, you can use spaces. So I'll usually do something like card space header and then card space paragraph, that kind of thing. And that just keeps it organized visually. I mean, the name is almost irrelevant inside a Builder because it's just whatever you name it, it's just for your own knowledge while you work. Anyway, let's get started. So this is the card that I've got so far. And software name right now is just a regular no code list heading and a heading 2. So it's got some default font family, a weight, a line height, and a margin. And then because it's the H2, we set the size for the H2 inside of that H2 utility class. So right now I pulled these from the no code list, but I believe I pulled the H2 from this H2 up here. So if I inspect this, font size here, 1.714, etc. M. That's what I have set here. But what I can do for the cards themselves, I'll double check that that's the same size. And I may have to adjust it for the card. So here's the H2. And it looks like it's the same, 1.71428. That's the same. So I won't need to add a size change there. But I can see here that the card, when it's in a card title, has a margin top of 2M on that H2. And I assume that just pushes it down and makes it look a little nicer. Like, if you look closely, it might be hard to tell because there might be some margin on the bottom here, but you can see the sides of this card. The padding is smaller than the top here. I assume that this is going to have equal padding all around. I believe that's how we set it up. And so I just have an extra margin here. Now I could put a margin top on this H2, but I could also put padding top on the card, or do, there's several ways to do it. In this case, I'm coming to this cold. I haven't even really thought about why it's like that, but I'll just probably stick to that just because. And just to confirm, because I was talking about it, we can go to this card here. And we can see it has an equal 2M padding all around it. And I'll just keep it like that and then add in a margin top around. Now, I could do it on this H2. Here's something interesting. Not to make it more complicated, because really all I'm going to do is stick a margin top on that H2. But this, I can see by these green boxes here, these outlines, that there's something on the bottom of here. There's some kind of margin on the bottom of here, or padding. And this actual H2 has no margin or padding on top. But this image here is slightly aligned to the top. So I noticed when I was clicking back and forth through these, this one's a good, this 8B shows this off. The 8B image is not lined up with the words. Or you can see on Adalo here, the image is a little higher, but on the real no-code list, they line up. And I'm wondering if maybe that's because of this margin top on the H2. And if it is, maybe I won't do it this way. Oh no, they still line up vertically. So that's something else. So I'm going to do it this way. So let's go in, and I can do this technically on here, which is the H2, which it looks like that's where it was on the no-code list real version. Or I could do it on this container image and title on the whole container. And in this case, this is like kind of a one-off style. This isn't really, I don't need a class for this. It's going to happen everywhere. This is just one card, one place I'm doing this. So like these other inline styles, I'm just going to come right into the inline and do margin top. And if you notice that some other margins look like this. This is a shorthand margin. So in CSS, it looks like this, margin with 4 values. And that's shorthand for, instead of saying margin top 0, margin right 0, margin bottom 1M, margin left 0. Instead of writing all 4, you can write it shorthand like this. And so in this margin I just added, I just did it with the original margin top. And the reason I did that as opposed to using that shorthand is because I don't know what the rest of these margins, I mean, I actually know the rest of these margins are 0 because it's just a container, but in theory, like in other areas, I don't know what the margins around the rest of that is. So I don't want to override them with 0. So I do margin top 2 and just margin top. All right, so that pushed that down. And then I remember these look a little smaller when that inspector's open, so I'll keep that closed. This looked like it was, or we checked and it was the same size, just had the margin. And so now what I'll do is I'll center vertically the image here and the words. And we'll double check that margin real quick. Okay. So, and actually, the images here look a little bigger. Am I right? Let's see why, because I can do this all in one shot. So the image itself, okay, so the image itself has some properties on it. It's got a max height, it's got a margin right, and it's got a max width and a vertical line middle. I forget what we have on the current version on ours, but maybe nothing. So let's see. Oh, just a width 100% inline. So I think at this point, so I've got this image primary class here. I think at this point I'm going to add a new class, and I'll call this card image. And then this width 100% that's inline, I'll actually take it out of inline by cutting it. You can see it blew up here. And then I'll paste it back in its class. And the only reason I do that is it's a little cleaner. You know, anytime if I have a class that makes sense to use, I'll move the inline into the class. It keeps it's cleaner visually in the code that it outputs, but also it's a little easier to edit in the future. And depending on how you're using things, if you have multiple instances, you know, it'd be much easier to edit. So it's just a little nicer, but you don't actually have to do that. Especially in this case, I could have left that out. So let's put in the rest of these and see how close we get. And so I just copied those styles, and that already had, actually that had a max width of 100% instead of width. So let's keep the width, just see what happens. I know of like one kind of issue with the width. The reason I'm not just copying exactly, currently, if I have a responsive SVG, meaning an SVG that's not declaring a specific like box size in the code, it spreads out full width, but the actual image is just in the center. It's a weird little quirk. So I save all the images for no code list myself to kind of keep them in the same format, and I actually save them in a way that it doesn't that it does include the bounding box coordinates in there, and then it always makes them smaller. So for this new version, I want to stop doing that. I want to avoid that, because actually, if I find most of the time I create like a small icon version of each logo, but sometimes I find like an icon version that'll work. And if it's an SVG, that's, you know, what I want. I love it, but I can't actually just import it. And so this will help me in those cases. So let's see. Card image. Okay, so I added these properties, and then I need to test it, which didn't do anything. So now what I'm going to do, so actually it did do something. The images look the same now. I think that max height maybe is what made them, so they look better because they look a little more standard, but they're tiny, right? Like this one, they're bigger. So let me see, oops. Let me see if I can play with this. First, I'm checking this grid, the CSS grid, and just making sure. So the max width of this area here is 2 rem, which that in itself, actually, I should check that. That might be what's making it small. Nope. All right, let me put that back to 2. And then image. So this is the only one I had different. That doesn't affect it. So the max height of 1.75 m is making this too small on my screen, which is interesting because that is the value that it has on here. Like, it should be the same. Let me just double check what's on this one. Oh, I wonder if it's a combination of that width and the max height. And so a lot of times when you get to specific little style quirks, like because there's so much in CSS, basically, like you end up doing stuff like this where I'm just toggling stuff on and off, just trying to get my head around what the best way to approach this is, or like what the problem is. And so originally I changed this width and it didn't do much, although it did do something there. But now if I take them both off, I can see it gets a little bigger. And if I look at this action desk one, that looks pretty close. The 8B looks like it's smaller. So that's a little strange. I don't know what's going on, but I'm going to adjust. The other thing I can kind of see is that the whole image area looks a little bigger on the live version. So let me see, and let me just disable my notifications real quick. Okay, let's see. So I'm gonna check first how for the width of this image, it's gonna be different on the no code list itself. it's Flexbox div, and on the new one I'm making, it's a grid, CSS grid. So I know this will be a little different, but oh, you know what? I know what it is. So because I made a grid, this whole like top row is a like the image and the title is a CSS grid, and it's set to be 2 rem for the first column, and then the second column fills the rest of the width. But I just added this margin right onto the image of 0.5 m or 0.5 rem, maybe 0.5 m. And because in Flexbox that'll push everything over, but in CSS grid, that grid's 2m or 2 rem no matter what. So the margin right of 0.5 is actually inside of the grid instead of outside, which I want. What I really want in this case is I want a column gap on that grid of 0.5 m, and I want to remove this. And I might already have that gap. Let's see. Yep, column gap 0.5. So this should be a little closer here. Forgot to remove those other properties that I was toggling off. So, oops. So for now, the width I didn't want to have on there, and the max height I didn't want to have on there. So let's see. I'll just delete them. We'll see what happens. Okay. All right. So that looks a lot closer. It still looks like there's more of a gap like at this one, or maybe this 8B is even bigger, but some of the other ones are starting to look good now. And what I can also do at this point, because it's not, I don't have to match it exactly. You know, I might at this point actually just look at this visually. These look a little small to me. So maybe I'll just make them a little bigger and kind of break from the original code. But for now, I might leave it as it. Oh, I'll make sure the vertical centering works. And then I'll probably leave it as is, fill out the rest, and then see how I feel about the size of that image. So for this vertical centering, the original no-code list had vertical aligned middle on it. And that seemed to do the trick. And I don't know if maybe this H2 also has it. Not sure, but either way, in CSS grid, that's not going to work. Those things are too separate. They're not actually working with each other. But what I can do for CSS grid is I can say, let me just find it. Similar to Flexbox, and this is kind of funny because I just learned this. I can use align items middle in grid. So here's like, you can see these are align top, align bottom, align middle. Or actually, if you hover over, center is the property, and like flex end is the bottom, flex start. Those are the property names, so that I can know this is vertical align center. And I only know that because of CSS. It's not a self-explanatory name. It's not even self-explanatory values for these. But I did learn recently, like 2 days ago, that you can use it on CSS grid. You can see here it did something, but this is still a little jammed up. And the reason this is jammed up is probably because there's a margin bottom of 1M on all H2s coming from this heading, or it's on all headings right here. So what I'll do is on this one specifically, which is like card H2 or card header, I'll put a margin bottom of 0. And I haven't done any other changes to this. I haven't created a separate class when it's in the card. So I'm just going to add it into the inline for now. And just say margin bottom 0. Okay, so that brought that up, which is nice. But it also brought the words and everything underneath closer to the title. So you can see on, well, actually, that's not so bad. That's actually very similar. I was going to say we might need to add in that margin 1M. We might need to add that back in on the outside div that we added the margin top to. But, you know, maybe not. It doesn't really look bad. So maybe we'll add it. Maybe we'll add it back in at some point. But for now, I'm going to leave that out. And so now these are vertically centered, the image and the title. And I'm going to start to do these. Like basically what I'll do is I'll start with a default font size of the card. No, actually, that's a good point because that would make this, oops, that would make this title a little smaller too, which I think it should be, right? Yeah, that looks big. Okay, so what I'm thinking is, and this is cool because this goes back to what I was doing with the setting up a pixel value on the body class and then setting everything else in M's or rems. So everything's proportional. So what I can do is this H2, when I inspected it, it was 1.71 whatever M, which is the same as the default H2. But when I look at it, it looks smaller. Like that's bigger than this. And the reason is because I actually have a font size set in M's on this card. And so not only, and so to finish that thought, the base font, which I think is 15 pixels in this, is there. Then the card might be like, 0.75 M, say, like, which is roughly 75% of the size. And then everything in that card is going to be scaled down 75 to 275%. And then the H2 is 1.71 M, so it's like 1.7 times bigger, roughly. So now we like start from the 75% scaled text and scale it up 1.7 times. So you can see like with all that math in there, it's going to be a smaller final size. And I'm setting only one hard-coded pixel value. So when I do responsive and I change that 15 pixels on the body class to like 13 pixels or 10 pixels, everything scales down proportionally. So not only do the cards scale down correctly within themselves, but they're proportional to the other H2s, et cetera, et cetera. And so to find out what I scaled it down to, I'm going to look for some kind of a card class, which I see right here, a card. And so I've got cards, card hover. So the whole list of them is cards. Then one of them is a card. And then these properties are hover, which this is just box shadow, looks like. Here I have a cards hover, which is when you're hovered over the whole cards, and then a card. And this is getting into some of the complex CSS I did for these rollovers that push everyone down except the one you're on, and they all rise up. So I don't need any of these. These are just the hovers. Here's a media query with card and the width of the card. That's not what I'm looking for. Here's cards. So this is probably getting to be where I want. I've got an animation for when they load. I've got the background color, border radius. This is good, all this stuff. Although I still don't see a font size. Font size is 100% on the card itself, so that's cool. So we can go maybe to this card info. Now I have this class called card info on the live no code list. It's not necessary to be in there. So I didn't include it on the new version I'm building. It's kind of just like having an extra container in there. But I bet you this one now, well, it doesn't have a font. Okay, so we'll go to the next one. Oh, you know what? Actually, maybe the whole outside called cards, the whole div might change the font size. Something is definitely changing it. We can see it. So let's find it. So there around the cards, the list of cards, which is called cards as a class, there's another div on the live version with an ID of Airtable results list. And I know that I was using that as like, I was using that ID to pipe in the data. So maybe this one, although it doesn't look like it, changes the font size. Still not seeing it. So now we have another, I'm just going up the chain basically. Now we have another one called no code list results. So if I go to no code list results, still not seeing a font size. Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. I did something dumb as I'm looking at this. This is only smaller because this inspector is like causing a media query. It's like making it smaller. Let me see. Oops. Kind of forget how to pop this out. Let me just close it for now. If these go bigger and if they match, then I was just wasting my time. Oh no, they're still smaller. So I'm just going to keep going up the chain basically. We've got, so I start at card info, card visible, cards. Just go all the way down to. Airtable results list. Font size 100. Oh, it's got to be. Let me just double check something else. You know what? It's a full site-wide thing. So I apologize for going down that little rabbit hole, but it's actually not in the cards even, because look, these, this is my builder version. These are also bigger than this. So I don't know if it's a distraction or not, but maybe let's figure these out. I'm just gonna look quickly. If it's not quick, I'll do this later because I wasn't planning on finding this deeper in the code. But you never know. I'm assuming that just somewhere on here, there's gonna be a font size override. So far, I've not found it though. And some of these classes and some of this stuff is like coming from the original Ghost setup, which, so I feel like I did some things for weird reasons. So I don't know. It could have been something weird here that I did. There we go. That might be the media query actually, but yeah, it just overrides 15. Yeah, I don't know. That should be correct. So this is saying at this size, which let's just match these with the thing open. At around 1166, this is saying the font size is 14 pixels on the body. If I go to here and drop it to around 1166, I'm just looking here in the width, and then went to the body. Font size is 15. Oh, because I didn't do responsive yet. Let me just check what this looks like at 14. I think it still looks bigger. So maybe I'll tackle this next time. I'll do a little, like what I'm doing is kind of like, it's probably boring, but I'm just looking through stuff. I'll do that in between, and then I'll come in the next time knowing what's going on, and we'll just fix it. Because it's sort of valuable to do this kind of stuff. I mean, every time you learn stuff, basically. But the real value is more like knowing you have to do it. All right, so yeah, sorry about that, but I'm gonna skip that. I'm just gonna keep going and start filling in these cards. Because what I really want to do today is get these cards to look a little more like these cards, and that's more important. But I am quite confused. The coder in me, like the maker in me, really wants to badly go figure this out, but I'm not going to. So I'm going to start in on these next things, and I think that I didn't. Okay, yeah, so I did already pipe in the actual description, which I can do a refresher maybe. So on this description element, which is a paragraph element in Builder, I have on this data tab, I have it bound to a variable called excerpt. And that's because when I pull in the Airtable data, which I did previously, I won't go through it again right now, but pulled in the Airtable data, it gives me on this page for each record, it gives me a variable for every Airtable column name. So this column excerpt right here is the description that I want to output. So that's why I have this element bound, the data that's bound to it is from a variable. I could go from a field and do a native builder collection, data collection, but in this case I'm doing variable because I'm coming from Airtable, and then excerpt. And so that's pretty much done. Like I don't need to do more for that. All I want to do is output it. For the endorsement message, which is this thing here. Oh, actually I got to add this URL in too. For the endorsement message, it's a condition. It's like if there is an endorsement in the database for this software, say how many, and if there's not, it's like a link to get people to endorse it. So in that case, I wouldn't bind it to data exactly. You know, I don't want to output the data that's in the Airtable column. I actually want to, if there's data in the Airtable column, do something. So in this case, instead of binding it, I'm going to do something a little different. I'm going to create an action. So basically when I load this card, I'm going to do a couple things like I know I'm going to. And so I'm going to put these all in the same action. But You don't have to. Actually, well, you know what I'll do just for organization for this live stream? I'm going to put each in its own action group, and then I'll pop the action groups into their own, together in one action. That's almost like one step more than necessary, but it's cool to see and it's good for organization. So I'll create an action group here, which is basically like what it's going to do is it's going to populate the endorsement message or like whatever. I don't know what I would call that section. It's like if it's an endorsement. So I'll say refresh endorsements. And I only call it that for my own. That's kind of just my style. It's like I know that I'm going to look at a value, do a conditional, and then update it visually. So I call it refresh because in theory, I could call it after the page is loaded, maybe something else happens. I could call refresh endorsements and it would update, but you could call it get endorsements, you could call it endorsements, you could call it gibberish if you really wanted to. So I create this action group and it's, I know I have this variable that comes from Airtable. And so if I look, let's see. So endorsements are called comments in the Airtable database. And so not submitter comments is different, but I see a field for total comments. And that's actually probably all I need to use. Here's comments where if there's comments for software, and most of these are me, but you can see people's names and there could be multiple in there. And so what I had planned on doing because I hadn't looked into this previously is I was going to see if these values exist and count them up. But actually total comments is a roll-up field in Airtable. Total comments is already counting them for me. So all I need to do is a conditional. I need to check total comments. If it's 0, show the message that says, do you love this tool? Want to endorse it? If it's greater than 0, then I'll output the number and say how many endorsements it is. So I'm going to insert a conditional condition action. So it comes with 3. Builder comes with 3. And it's cool to note the difference because it does matter. And this one is kind of the wild card. You can clearly see what that is. Condition user signed in, which this is just if someone signed in, you can do one action. If not, do another action. So we don't need to worry about that for now. There's not even users on here yet. But that is cool when you do users because, if you need to do a signed in or signed out state, especially in a menu with like, their avatar and a drop down and stuff, it's perfect action for that. Or if you need to like redirect them away even. But Builder also does page level sign-in authentication stuff. So you can block an entire page before it even loads if someone's not signed in. So anyway, condition compare values and condition switch. They're the 2 types of conditions, and you'll use these pretty much all the time when you get more advanced stuff in Builder. Like you need to do conditions a lot, just like in code. Compare values is what it sounds. You compare 2 values. So you set one value, you set another value, and you set an operator. So if value 1 equals value 2, if value 1 is greater than value 2, if value 1 contains value 2, and then you run actions if true or false. That's the one we're going to use. So I'll go into that in a second. Condition switch is different. Condition switch will check a value, and then it kind of says, if the value is this, do this. If the value is that, do that. If the value is X, do X. If the value is Y, do, and you have more options. So in this case, all I want to say is if the total comments is greater than 0, it's very simple comparing 2 values. That's what I use. So once I fill these out, I'll get 2 more fields. But for now, I have test value 1, an operator, and test value 2. What I'm going to look for is I'm going to look for this variable of total comments, which I get by default on this page. So test value 1, instead of text, I go from variable. Current page is correct. And I think I'll be able to do this with the space like that, but we'll find out. And I'm going to say if test comments is greater than 0. And now you can see I have action if true, action if false. And so I have to make action groups for these before I can insert them. So I do a system like I know that I have refresh endorsements and I know that these are the true false actions on there. So I would actually call this for organization only again. Call this whatever you want. I say refresh endorsements greater than 0 and refresh endorsements 0. Now, it might be slightly more logical to call this like set endorsement message 0 or set endorsement message greater than 0. Like I would say that that's probably better, but I do it like this for organization again, just so it's like I know that refresh endorsements running one of two actions, and I use the same name and then a dash. So no big deal, personal preference. But anyway, refresh endorsements. If test comments is greater than 0, I'm gonna run refresh endorsements greater than 0. If test comments is, well, equals 0 or less than 0, it's gonna equal 0. It's never negative. Then I do refresh endorsements 0. And so right now this would all work. It would run that condition and it would trigger these events, or trigger these actions, but the actions have nothing in them. So what we'll do is for refresh endorsements greater than 0, I want to change this endorsement message to say something. And what it's going to say is how many endorsements with a little emoji here. So what I do for that, there's an action called set element value or set value, element set value. And that'll set the value of any element. So in this case, it's a text element, it's setting the text value. But this also, if it's an image, it's going to set the SRC value. If it's, I don't know, if it's a list like this, it's going to set, you can set JSON into the value. So value is kind of like a broader term in Builder than it is in strict code, but in a way that makes it much more intuitive. So I'm going to set the value of this text, which is actually pretty standard. You'd expect that to set the text value. I'm going to choose the element. So I have containers extra. Oh, so these are all the same names. So let me just double check what this is. Extra, as I called it, and then this says this is a description. But really, this is an endorse message. and that's not a good name, actually. I'm just going to call this endorse message. All right. And the reason I set that is because now it's really easy when I select this. Whoops, let me just go off and let it reload. It's really easy now when I select this to say endorse message. Right there. And the value I'm going to set, so I probably should have done the 0 first. It's very much straightforward. I just type in what I'm going to set. This one, I actually want to use the number. Well, I'll do it in steps, actually. So for now, I'll say this has endorsements. Okay. And then I'll do the actual number next, just to keep these separated and go step by step. So all that refresh endorsements greater than 0 does is set value of the endorsement message to this has endorsements. And then if it's 0, we'll set value. And actually, just because I'm showing stuff, here's a trick. What I would normally do, since I already set some of this stuff, I can just go in here and copy this action, come into the 0, paste it, and now it's it's already selected. In this case, very minor because I'm selecting one thing basically, but sometimes you have actions with a lot of steps, and that's a pretty helpful thing. So this is if they don't have any endorsements, any comments, I'm going to say love this, endorse it. And now right now that's set up, and it's all in this refresh endorsements message or action group, but this refresh endorsements action group will never actually trigger until we tell it to. So when this card page loads, each one individually, when each one loads, each one's going to fire its own page load action one time. And the page load action by default is going to fire a page binding action, which could be fired again. So I'm going to come into this page binding action, and this page binding is where it actually does, if you're coming from a data collection, it binds the values to that data collection and populates them all. If I'm coming from Airtable, it'll pull in the variables and actually like populate with each of those, etc. So since I'm checking a variable, I'm going to put this action after page binding. So I'm going to set everything in, and then I'm going to start manipulating. And so I already created that as a separate action group. So I'm not adding an action and I'm not pasting, I'm nesting an action group. And I just choose refresh endorsements. And that's all I have to do. And I could put a wait in here. I probably need to do that. I'm not even 100% sure. But basically I'll wait until all the page binding is done, wait, and then run this. If I didn't have a wait, they technically run in order, but it's so fast that I could potentially run this refresh endorsements before it's done binding data. I just want to make sure that doesn't happen, so I put a wait. So now if I refresh, we should see a separate message for each of these, excuse me, depending on if they have an endorsement. And I can see love this endorse it is here, which is good. And I don't see the opposite though. So this might not be working yet, right? So love this endorse it is on every one, which is telling me that it's when it's doing that condition, it's saying, is this variable greater than 0? It's always saying no. And just to double check, because I know Airtable has one, should double check. Let me double check Airtable. Yeah, that's got an endorsement. So I'm guessing, remember I mentioned that the space in the variable name might be weird. I'm guessing it could be something like that. So let's see. And let me just double check this all correct. Current page. So one thing I can do, there's a couple ways to test if that variable is working or if that variable is pulling any value basically. I would usually do that by debugging, by inspecting, checking network calls. I can type stuff in the console actually that I know to check page variables, but that's not like super accessible stuff. You kind of need some special knowledge for that. So what you can do, or what I would sometimes do anyway, is I would find out if that variable is working by outputting it. So I have this endorsement message and I know that it's coming into this action here and it's working here. So instead of setting this value to straight text that I type, I'm going to set it to test comment and try to see if that's why. Wait, did I write test comment? That's not even what the total comments. Yeah, that's confusing. And see why that variable didn't work. So this should output, it should change the message here to either 0 or the number of comments. But since it didn't work in the other one, I expect it actually to show up blank. We'll see. And this is kind of like, you could call it a hacky way to debug, but I think it's great. It's fine. And look, this is working. So 0, 0, 0, 1 for Airtable. So actually the variable's working and the space wasn't the issue. What I'm guessing, and let me put that back just so I don't forget. So instead of coming from a variable, I actually want to go just from text. And I'll update this message in a second, but okay. So that means on this condition, I did this, I don't know why I did that, but I wrote test comments as the variable name, which is incorrect. It's called total comments. So now I actually expect this to work. So we got love this endorse it for 0, and for Airtable, this has endorsements. So perfect. So now what I can do is I want to update this message, and I don't want to say this has endorsements. I want to say how many endorsements, and I want to match these little emojis and these messages. So this just says heart this tool endorse it. It just says megaphone thing, the amount of endorsements. So go back to these actions. If it's 0, we say heart this, endorse it. And now if it's greater than 0, right now I have text and I typed this as an endorsement. I actually want to make, in code it's called concatenate. Well, in anything, putting these together is concatenate, but in code you concatenate, and I actually want to concatenate two values together, a variable, which is the number of endorsements, and then the actual text of the endorsements that says, so it'll say the number like 1, and then it'll say endorsements. And then also I want to put this megaphone in. So when I look at these words here, I'm actually looking at text, variable, text. And the way I do that in Builder is instead of doing text up here, I go to concatenate. Concatenate will let me enter a bunch of values and control the type of input here. So the first one is text. It's that megaphone thing. I don't know what that's called in an emoji. Here we go. Megaphone space, and then I'll add another variable value, and this time I'll come from a variable. Remember that variable is total comments. And then I'll add another variable, which is text again. and I'll do a space because it's, you know, when it outputs that total comments, it's just the number. So here I start with space, and then I say, let me see if that was capitalized, lowercase, endorsement. And actually, I'm going to write endorsements with an S for this one. And then I'm going to do a conditional right after this. And this is arbitrary. I'm coming up with this on the fly. Conditional right after this that says, if total comments is 1, remove that S. But for now, I'm going to check this, and it should roughly work. So love this endorse it showing up with a lot of space there for some reason. And then Airtable, that one endorsements. So that's perfect. And then I'll do that conditional I was talking about. So refresh endorsements if it's greater than 0. First, I'll set this value. And then next, I can run a conditional and check it. Or what I can do, let me actually just think really quickly if there's even a more efficient way. Well, I'm not sure. But basically, I have refresh endorsements greater than 0. And I'm setting a value. I was going to set the value and then run a conditional, but I can also just run a conditional. And if it's true, set one value. If it's false, set another. And basically, so let me add that in quick here. Condition if total comments equals 1, then do something. And if it equals 2, do something else. And I'm kind of dancing around because it's totally arbitrary what I'm about to do. I was going to say, like, in this conditional set both values, but really I can set this value first and then in the conditional do something else, like change it, remove the S, or just reset it with no S. And I think that's what I'll do because I do have to make a separate action group for each of these. So what I'll do is I'd rather make one separate action group instead of 2. Super minor, not, you know, my preference, but that's how I'm going to do it. And so just sticking to my system, I call this refresh endorsements. And now this is coming off of the greater than 0 one, and it's if it equals 1. So it's kind of a goofy name, but like I know what that means. That's like how my building brain works. And so if it's greater than 1, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the value a little differently. So I'm going to copy this one where I originally set the value and then paste it into here. But instead of endorsements, I'll call it endorsement. And I could actually do that a different way too. Like I could take the value that's already in that text box and chop off the S using paths. So it'd be like, what would it be, like split -1? I forget actually off the top of my head. That's simple JavaScript, but anyway, so I could do that. But in this case, like I already had that element or that action, just made it really easy. Just popped it in, removed that. So the last thing I'll need to do is I have this condition and I need to set one of these to that action. So if total comments equals 1, I'll set this action and replace it. And I can leave action if false blank. And so if total comments does not equal 1, it'll do nothing. And so love this endorse it, good. 1 endorsement, no S. And then let me find one with more than 1 endorsement. I wish I could remember one that had one. I know there are some. Let me just check the list much faster. Total comments. Part of my goal in rebuilding the no-code list is to improve the amount of comments. Like, it's really unintuitive how it works, but I feel like it could be so valuable. Oh, maybe none of them even have more than 1 comment. I could have sworn, but I don't want to mess with like the order of this or anything because this is Airtable based. Like, use it for other stuff. Oh, here's it too. Integromat. So I don't think I made this search work yet, did I? I did. Nice. So yeah, 2 endorsements with an S. We're good to go. So endorsements is basically done there. The last step we would do is make this so when you click on it, like you can see on this one, it's blue because it's a link. Oops. Make it so when you click on it, it would actually open the single page, which lists the endorsements. But I don't have those single pages built yet, so I don't need to make that link yet. So I'll move on to affiliate. Actually, I'm going to pop the URL. So I forgot to put a URL in here. So I'll put that in next. And that's very similar to description. And I don't know, I'm going to keep it container description. I'll put the description in the URL, and then I'll keep container extras for all the extra stuff. Actually, this is just, oh, stacks and endorsements. That's what that is. Okay, so in here, I'm going to duplicate the description one. And I'm not going to keep this text in here that says this is a URL. That was what I did the first day when I set this up. I'm actually going to put placeholders in here that are like a gray bar. So it's like people can tell that some content's going to load there if they see it flash. That looks a little bit nicer than a flash of words. And then, because what happens is when it loads, these words actually show up until the Airtable data comes in and replaces them. So for this one, this is a URL, and all I have to do, I think, is bind it to the URL field, which I have a website field and a website formatted field in no code list. Oh, this will actually be kind of cool maybe to set up. So I want to output the website formatted because I want it to look nice, but I actually want it to link to the website field because the website field has this no code list reference, so they know the traffic came from me. And the way this is set up in Airtable, this is a formula field. I actually remove HTTPS or HTTP. I remove any wwws, and I remove !ref equals. So that's how I kind of come up with this visually more pleasing URL. So that's what I'll use to start. I'm just going to pop that in here. I meant to look at that. Website formatted. So that's website formatted. So that'll come in here. And I want to set the actual href. So if this is a link, the href is the URL that you click to. I want to set that to the website. And I think there's probably not a great way to do that. Let's try. I probably have to do that with an action group is what I'm thinking out loud. But let me pop in a link. So I copied that description, which is a paragraph or a text box. But what I do really want there is a true link. I don't know what's going on with the ad. Let me see. I might have to refresh or something. Let me just refresh quick. And the reason I want to do that, so this is total like getting deep, but for SEO, I'll read those comments in a second. For SEO, a real link might be slightly better. In the past, it was definitely better, but I feel like, Google and search engines, they can parse through JavaScript to understand now. But a real link with an href is a little bit better and better for screen readers and accessibility, stuff like that. So when I can, I try to do that. I'm just reading these comments really quickly. Yeah, it's I think it's from before, but switch is like case. And this question about that's cool. This question, I assume this is Glenn but the Flow agency for pulling in Airtable data with rate limits. So there is 100 record per API call limit from Airtable, and then on top of that, there's 5 calls per second limit in Airtable. So what this pattern, when I originally pulled in the Airtable data, it comes from a pattern I made. The pattern pulls in 100, and then if there's more, it can automatically, you choose if you want it to do this, but it can automatically pull in the next 100. If there's more, it'll automatically pull in the next 100. When you do it like that, because they're kind of spaced out, I so far have not run into the limit. I did some tests with more than 500. I didn't hit the limit of the Airtable rate limit, but in theory, if you call those 5 calls fast enough, you could hit the limit. Or if 2 people hit the site at the exact same time, the live site, hit the site at the exact same time, then you could potentially get more than 5 API calls in that 1 second. And I think Airtable, I want to say they shut you off for like 30 seconds or something. So it's possible you'd hit that limit, and I don't know any good way to get around that besides caching like on the DNS level. So on the real no code list, I'm using Cloudflare and actually caching these calls to try to help avoid this. And that's helpful, but I don't think beyond that there's much more you can do. But like I said, I don't, even on the real code no code list, it's like I don't think there's enough traffic still. Where there's a lot of traffic, but I still don't think there's enough where people are hitting it. And I get a comment from someone once where they hit the API limit. So I don't know, but yeah, no code API is a good one. I actually originally built a no code list API that was custom, and then no code API came out like right after, and it's exactly what I would have needed. But yeah, they take care of that. So you could use that too, in which case you could probably pull this Airtable data in a different way than using the pattern. But yeah, like I said, the pattern will take care of the initial rate limit issue, which is 100 records per call, which is, I understand why they do it, but it tends to be pretty annoying. So that part's taken care of. So for no code list, right now it's got almost 300 records, but like by next week or whenever I do the next update, it'll be a little over 300. That's gonna have to do 4 API calls each time. And so we'll see how it goes. My long-term plan, step 1 is moving into Builder. Long-term plan for step 2 is I can actually take the Airtable data once it's in this grid of cards, and I can have a data collection in Builder, and I can just say save, and it'll save all those cards as their own records into Builder's native data. So it's super powerful. And then and I would kind of have to make this all, like I could make it so that if I did it again, I could update those. So yeah, it's definitely cool, and it's not like trivial, but it's not hard either. So it's something I have in the back of my mind. But for me, step 1 is actually get it into Builder in the first place, get it all working, and then I'll probably work on that. And if I ever see that people are not getting all the entries, I'll definitely do that. So yeah, that's the API limit. All right. Oh yeah, URL. So I just refreshed this. That's where I was. And for the URL, instead of using the text box, I'm gonna pull in a link. Drop it right in here. Cool. Let's see. What's happening? Did that link not drop in? Oh, it's like frozen. I'm gonna give it a second. See that. Oh, there it goes. Nice. So I see the link in here. So I don't know what that was. It was held up for a second. It's kind of crazy. And you can see, so this is a text box and this is a link. They're a little different. The text box has the display text property, and I can choose to make it like a P, a span, or a div. But the link gives me the display text and an href property. And a target too. So href, you can say open it in its own window or open it in a new window. For this case, if I set value, it's going to set the display text, or if I bind value too. So up here, the URL is bound, or the URL text box is bound to from variable website formatted. So I can do the same for the link. And then that should work. And then what I'll do is I'll set the href separately. So I said, so the thing about, let me just inspect this and make sure. It'd be cool if it said on both. I don't think it does. The thing that I said about SEO actually doesn't really even matter, because I'm going to set this programmatically anyway. Like it's not quite as important, but it's still, once I set it, the JavaScript's going to actually insert an href attribute on this A tag. So that is better for screen readers and accessibility than it is if you just use JavaScript. Because you can use JavaScript on anything and say on click, send them to a link. So this isn't perfect, but slightly better. That's the point. So this link, before I go further, I'm just going to title it URL. And then, and I don't need this one anymore. And then, similar to how I ran a condition on the page load, it's refresh endorsements. I'll just make one called refresh URL. And basically anything I want to do that URL, I can do in here. For now, all I'm going to do is set the href, but I can do a lot of stuff. So in this case for href, it's an attribute. And I know that because of code, it's not necessarily intuitive, but it's also a pretty basic thing. So if you Google this, you'd find this. I'm going to set the attribute. I'm going to use element set attribute. So for to set the values, sorry, I did element set value. To set the attribute, element set attribute. Choose my element first, which is this URL link. The property name, which is the attribute name, is href. And again, I know that from code. It's not builder specific. But I set that. And then the property value, instead of text, I'll go from a variable. And this time, I'm not going to pull in website formatted. I'm going to pull in website. Okay. And then, so that should be good there. And then lastly, when they click on a company and I take them to that company's website, I want to actually open that in a new window. I don't want to open it in self, just in case they're browsing, right? I want to make sure they can get back to my site. So underscore blank is new window. So I can see the URLs. I don't actually see when I hover here, I don't actually see the hrefs. Let me double check this. Oh, that's funny. It didn't set. Oh, so I forgot. This is funny because normally, like if I know what I'm doing and I know that this is just setting, it's just one action setting an href, I wouldn't create its own action group. I would just pop that right on the page binding. In this case, I did. I created refresh URL, but I forgot to fire refresh URL. So right after I do refresh endorsements, let's refresh URL. And you can start to see a pattern. What I'm doing here is after the page binding, I'm just going to run a few things. So anytime, whether page binding runs from on this card or whether somewhere else in Builder, like another page calls the cards to run their page binding action, which you can do. Wherever it happens, it gets that Airtable data and then it updates all these values. So it kind of keeps it organized. And so first I wait on the page bindings, but after that, I don't need to wait anymore. These all can fire whenever they want. So now actually that href should be in there. And I can see down here, yeah, you can see that on my screen. It does come up, or if I inspect it, I can see right here, href equals, and this is the full unformatted URL with no code list there. And then if I click on one, opens in a new window. Okay. So that's URLs. And then the only other thing I had there on the real no code list, I have this arrow in front of it. Yeah, let's put the arrow back in. I love those arrows, actually. It's something I do all the time for if something's going to a new URL, usually like a new page or not like somewhere not on the no code list. I use the arrow, but I like how it looks visually. So that will be on, oh, you know what? That's on the page binding. So this is cool. This is a good opportunity to use. I have refresh URL. It's organized into that action. So I'll keep this bound so that it populates right away. But I'm going to actually set value here and make a new value for the URL. Right? And I'll do this after so the href comes in first. So this one, and actually here, let's name these two. So now I know when I'm browsing through my actions, I'm like, oh, I'm setting attribute href. Got it. This one I'm setting value, which is just the name, or it's the website URL with the arrow. So I choose my URL, and for the value, I'm going to do a concatenate again. And the first value is this arrow that I love, space. And the second value is from variable website formatted. I don't need a wait in between, so these can basically fire right away. And this refresh URL is already firing on page binding. So if I refresh now, I get that. Oh, I forgot that's going to be in the link now. So I really actually want that outside of the link. So I didn't even need to do what I did. I can actually just insert text. So this link here, this description is a p tag. It's a block level. It goes full width. If I insert another text box in between, you can see from here that this is also a block level full width. The A tag looks like it might be, but it's actually not. I know A tag's inline. So for this text box, if I change the actual tag to a span instead of a div, it's now inline because span's inline. HTML thing again. So you can see there's a text box here, and then a link, and they're side by side. And this text box, the display text, is always the same, so I don't need to do an action. I can just type in the arrow space, and now you can see arrow space link. And then this thing where I set the arrow into the URL, I don't need, so I delete that. So now we're back to probably what it should look like. Yep. So I got that. So we've got description, this, and I can see already there's some spacing I'm going to need to take care of, which is fine. Website, endorsement, and then stacks is the next one. We'll check for stacks. Oh man, has it already been an hour? Oh, it's already been over an hour. So maybe I'll cut it off because I want to keep these to an hour just so they're not insane. And it'll take me longer to finish this whole card. So that's okay though. I'll just keep going. Next time I can do the stacks, the affiliates, the showcase link up here, and then style these categories because they're already popping in, but we'll just style them. And at that point, I'll just feel really good because these cards will all be done and it'll look a little nicer than this. And then I think my plan originally was to come into categories next, style up all the hovers and stuff, and then style the menu. And at that point, we'll be in really good shape as far as the homepage itself goes. There's obviously more to do on the site, but that's a lot for right there. So yeah, thanks for watching. Thanks for asking questions too. It's good. I really do want to go like off topic and like cover some builder stuff. So I love that. Yeah, and thanks for watching. Next time is Friday, same time. I'll do it Friday. Tomorrow in America is Thanksgiving, so happy Thanksgiving if you're here. And yeah, see you Friday. Thanks.